Welcome back, everybody, for another episode of Riftbound 101. It's episode 21, and today we're going to be covering Sett in Focus. And for those who are not following this super closely or not in the know, there was an FAQ yesterday that changed some rulings, particularly on reflexive targets, which I think is going to have a big impact on this episode. So I, planned this before that, but I think Sett will be affected by that quite greatly. So today's going to be a short episode-ish. We're going to be covering core concepts for Sett, key pieces, two of the variants, and really the fact that they're kind of merging into one deck more or less. A core build and some budget options, or actually two core builds and a budget option. And I want to start this with the caveat that if you are watching this, I would also just recommend that you go watch Challenger TCG and their YouTube channel. A lot of the decks I'm going to be talking about today are Colin Kaiser's lists and the adaptations he's done since he won, I think he won at Vegas. But he also plays third at the Orlando PPG event. And for me, at least, he's kind of like the person whose content is the most relevant for how to build and pilot Sett in general. So go check out their channel as well. And their Metafy, which I'm pretty sure they have. So core concepts for Sett. Sett is an order body champion or legend, which gives you access to colors that are generally playing beefy bodies and are good at protecting them and have some pretty good removal, but are actually like pretty light on card draw. And Sett's ability lets you recycle a rune to and exhaust him to spend a buff that is on any unit and recall the unit that was about to die exhausted to your base. So it's not a move, and the unit does not die. So if there are any like on death effects, they will not trigger. Sett is effectively just like Zonia's Hourglass, but just like constantly. And you do get to ready him and use this effect a second time if you conquer in a turn, or even a third time if you're conquering multiple times. So what this should let you know is that Sett cares about buffs quite heavily, more heavily than Leona, who produces them, and is often going to be recycling a lot of runes. And so you're going to be playing with very low rune economy, which makes it really hard to access spells that are 6, 7, 8, 9, or above in terms of energy. So when we take a look at the main deck curves, it should not be surprising that Colin's list, which I'm calling list A, is almost exclusively on cards that cost 4 or less. And your 6 cost spells are really going to be your sabotages and your showstoppers, which I'll talk about in a second. And then your units are mostly located between 2 and 4, with one Sett brawler being your 5-drop, 2 depending on the build, and then you get, I think, 3 first mates. And then the other version of Sett that I wanted to have in here to highlight is from the Orlando PPG 5K Sunday event. This one runs yellow Sett. Colin used to run yellow Sett Champ Zone. He's now running orange Sett a bit more, presumably with the option to transform the deck with some sideboards to turn it back into yellow Sett. But as you can notice, the sort of split is reasonably the same, the exception being that this deck actually runs a pretty spicy 6-drop that I'm going to talk about later in the video, but really like nothing above that. And these decks have even cut out Divine Judgment, which was like the top end 7 energy card. So I think more than any other deck that I've talked about in this series, these decks are like the quintessential like play small units and small spells and protect them with buffs and like build some value, but really force your opponent to expend a ton of resources and removal to stop you from winning the game earlier rather than later. And realistically, what you want to be doing with this deck is playing a 2-drop on your first turn, jamming it into a battlefield, starting to hold, and then accelerating, and probably, like, if you can have it your way, winning on like turn 5, which is really fast. And unless people are ramping, means that like they can never really bypass 8 runes reliably. So the other thing that I want to talk about are sort of the priorities of this deck. So I usually do this and I talk to you about like pieces of card draw and interaction. Now, you might notice Sett runs very little card draw. And that's generally because Sett's going to win the game so quickly that you are not spending the game drawing cards. You're spending the game basically asking the opponent to find answers to you or lose immediately. For that to work, you need very consistent sources of buff to make use of and to protect your units. So you're going to have a lot of that. You have like 16. Some of those are repeatable, and I'll talk about them shortly. And then you have some interaction. Depends really how you think about interaction. I would say 10 are like pieces that interact with your opponent's side of the board, and the rest are pieces that you are using to interact. But since you're making opponents like engage you so frequently, this turns cards like Primal Might into sort of a counterspell, right? If you're constantly forcing the opponent to do stuff to stop you from winning the game, as opposed to letting them have their game plan, I would consider that like unit buffs fulfill that function as well. And I think Sett really exemplifies like a sort of aggressive mindset that I see a lot when I play Magic, which is the make them have it mindset, right? You are the aggressor. You are the person who has consistent board placement, and you're going to make the opponent have whatever answer they can have. The other thing that I want to talk about, which I think is going to be now, is the matchups. So usually I used to do matchups a bit later in the video. I think now that we have the win matrix from Riftex, which is, somewhat like partial, but offers us some cool data, we can talk about matchups a bit more quickly and also about like some of the changes. So as you can see on the last line, Sett is, overall like 7th in the meta in terms of general win rate with a 46%. He has somewhat unfavored Kaisa and Annie matchups, much more unfavored Master Yi, Teemo, and Darius matchups. But Darius is virtually non-existent, only 18 matches. Teemo, only 43 matches recorded. So like the vast majority of those matches come from Kaisa and Annie. And for folks who did not hear about this, one of the FAQ changes from yesterday was that the reflexive triggers produced by Falling Star and Icathian Rain no longer exist. So Falling Star used to read do this, deal 3 damage, deal 3 damage. So you play the spell and actually put 2 new triggers on the chain. And what would happen is if you had, for example, a 3-drop unit and they hit it twice, you would be able to use Sett's trigger the first time to save it from the 3 damage. It would get recalled back to base, and then it would get pinged by the second tick, and it would die very quickly. And so, as you can see, aside from Teemo, the decks that really hammer Sett are all red decks. Annie runs only 1 Falling Star, maybe 2 in the side. Darius, depending on the build, is on 1 or 2 as well, but Kaisa is usually on 3. And so Falling Star has been one of the main drivers of the meta. Well, now Falling Star cannot kill you through because both instances of damage happen at the same time. And if you want to be super, not like on the ball with this, this also means that like Falling Star can no longer kill units through Zhonya's Hourglass, and neither can Icathian Rain. So Sett's matchup into Kaisa has improved immeasurably. Now, Kaisas were already cutting copies of Icathian Rain. Most are on 0 or 1. But Falling Star was like the way to stabilize early, and it let you hit base. And Sett is pretty happy if what he does turn 1 is like play his shoe drop, and then you Falling Star it, and he has to like protect it, or you would have to have a buff earlier on, so maybe you're not playing the unit first up. But if the first interaction is like small unit against Falling Star, and you pay a rune and a card, and he only plays a rune to protect the card, Sett's coming up on that exchange. And for decks that can't discount Falling Star, that's even more of a tax for the Falling Star player. So these are the stats that we've had up until now, like the 43% win rate and the 45% win rate and the 33% against Darius. I'm reasonably sure these are about to get a lot better, to the point where they're either 50s or they are, reasonably like favored as well. Obviously, the Master Yi matchup has not improved, but there's always the discussion of like what kind of set builds are people running, and especially like if the Falling Star matchup changes, what can you change to make things a bit better? So if you're still seeing a lot of Kaisa, then be ready for this to work out super well for you. Also, the increase to Zonia means you're probably going to see a bit more of the mid range or aggro Yi lists and more Yasuo and Leona. Sett is favored into Yasuo and is also like, coin flip you with Leona, although 4 matches is like super unreliable. So you know, don't take that as gospel at all. And in general, these like sample sizes are small. They are nowhere near the order of like a digital card game. Um, I feel a bit more comfortable like for the Kaisa and Annie stats and Yi, but beneath that it gets a bit more, uh, you know, complicated. And these are for number of matches, but evidently, like Sett is maybe third or fourth in the set in terms of matches. So yeah, this is like good. This effectively turns like Sett's win rates closer to something like Master Yi's win rates. So we'll see what that looks like, but just keep that in mind. And the key pieces to talk about today are really going to be, on the one hand, your buff generators, on the other end, your buff payoffs, and then what I would call disruption, but not necessarily a sense of interaction, but really like pieces that break up the pace of play and spike a lot of damage or a lot of pressure all at once. So, your buff producers, I think there's nothing super surprising about this. Sith, you have Cloudfield, one might for 2 when you play it, does nothing, but then every time you play a unit, you buff her. And crucially, you can spend the buffs that she generates to save other units or herself, and then when you play another unit, she will continue to get buffs. So throughout the game, your Cytheria will often expend 2 to 3 buffs quite reliably. Pit Rookie buffs another friendly unit. Obviously, you would like to have a target for it, but sometimes you won't. And then sometimes you'll just have to play it as like a 2-drop, which is fine as well. Kinku Monk is kind of like bigger Cytheria. The decks that do play it play like 2 ofs, not really more than that, because it does burn a rune. But 4 Might is good. It's over 1 tick of Falling Star, and now interacts much better with Icathian Rain as well, and it allows you to buff 2 other units. And then Arena Bar lets you buff exhausted units. So evidently, you can buff them the turn that they come into play, and if not, you can buff them after using the buffs for different abilities, which often happens during showdowns. So Arena Bar will, like Cytheria, produce many more buffs. So we were looking at like the 16 buff sources. Arena and Cytheria are like 2 of the main ones to do it. So yeah, buffs let you pressure. They make your units a bit bigger. They make them trade more profitably, and then you get to like utilize those as a resource as well. And then you have your what I would call your buff payoffs, which really fall into 2 kind of like categories: your explicit and your implicit ones. So Sett Brawler, I think, is pretty useful to think through this. He is an explicit buff generator and payoff. He makes his own buff, and he makes another one every time he conquers. But he allows you to spend a buff to give him +4. So for example, if you play him, you can spend the buff. He will go up to 8 power. Then you can like use Arena Bar to give him another one. And then spend it. He'll go up to 12. And then you can Showstopper him, and he'll get another buff, and he'll go up to he'll be at 12 power. And if he dies, you just get to utilize the new buff that you got off of Showstopper. And if you Showstoppered him into like Monastery of Hirana, you get to spend the new buff, and he'll also get another one when he conquers. So Sett is like an explicit user of buffs. Sett Kingpin gets +1 for every buffed unit at his battlefield, and things like Lee Sin Centered will buff units that do have. You give +2 to units that are buffed. So these cards often will reward you for having buffs, and they are a core part of like your 1-2 punch. And then you have a couple cards that aren't necessarily like interested in buffs but benefit from them very well. So like Fiora, for example, will gain multiple keywords when she is buffed because it puts her to 5 might, which makes her mighty. And so that's good. But also cards like Kiana. Kiana doesn't really like get anything listed on the card, but a 5 might deflect unit that has like a good on conquer ability is inherently more valuable. So you want like certain units to wear your buffs as well. The third category I talked about is sort of like disruption. So Call to Glory, I think, is perfect for this. It is a buff expender. It costs 3 might, 3 energy, reaction speed, and it gives +3. But you can spend a buff to ignore its spell cost. So often you can feint having no resources, and your opponent still has to play around a Call to Glory. Notably, you can expend buffs from any unit. So again, if you're keeping like a Cythria in the base, same as like Sett's ability, you can use that buff. Sabotage, one of the 1-cost spells, allows you to effectively like dismantle your opponent's hand. You're really looking for removal. You're looking for things that disrupt your game plan because oftentimes you're going to be happy trading through units. So Sabotage in like decks that want to target Aurora, or our Aurora decks will often target big game pieces. With Sett, you're often going to target like lower energy interaction that is really annoying to you. Challenge, another piece of disruption that I think is super useful. It is removal, and it is removal in base, which Orange does not have an abundance of, so it is very good. And then Kiana just like breaks up your opponent's rune pool by forcing them to pay for the deflect. And I piloted this deck, or a version of Colin's deck, 2 skirmishes ago. And I can tell you I played into just like a straight slate of Kaisas, and Kiana and Fiora back-to-back is pretty like soul-destroying to a lot of players that are very removal-based because they're going to have to recycle so many runes to do anything. And I even managed to catch somebody into an Icathian Rain that they had no choice but to play, and it just like destroyed their mana base, and they lost like 2 turns after. So I really love these units, and I consider these like to be a core part of like breaking up the tempo. Okay. And the final card to talk about, which deserves like a category on its own, is Showstopper. So Showstopper is Sett's signature spell. It buffs a friendly unit and then it moves it. So it gives pseudo accelerate if you're playing it on something that just hit the battlefield. And if you are on something like Windswept Bastion, it can also give like pseudo ganking, kind of like replicating what Yasuo does with some of his units. If you put the buff on Fiora, it's pretty brutal because Fiora also, I'm pretty sure Fiora does get ganking when she's at 5. And Kiana will just like be a bit bigger. Obviously, Orange Sett and even Yellow Sett just like get super big. Yellow Sett has 5 might. You buff him, he goes up to 8 because he gets 7. He gets +1 for each buffed unit. So Showstopper will often shore up a weakness that Yellow and Orange have, which is they don't have as many accelerate units as Red and Blue. And so it kind of like speeds up the deck considerably, which is really essential for the pace that Sett wants to play at. It is one of the reasons why Showstopper remains an expensive card, despite the fact that Sett has been going down in equity. And I think this card will forever be a triple in Sett. It's just such a amazingly like it's such a consistent and lean and really high impact spell, which is everything that you want in this kind of deck. Not much to complain about. Battlefields. So Sett is one of like 2 decks that gets to run Monastery of Hirana consistently, or 3. The other ones are like Lee Sin and Leona, depending on the build. But effectively, you want the name of the game with Battlefields is you want to be as asymmetrical as possible. You want to get not advice. You want to get value from them while your opponent does not. And so, since you're one of the rare decks that actually makes buffs and is happy spending them, you're going to get some card draw off of this. So you're happy playing Monastery in like your first game. Grove of the Godwillow allows you to draw while holding, and Sett is one of the very few hold decks, which will, makes his life a bit harder once purple enters like the battlefield in Sett 2. But Grove is a battlefield that I really like when you're starting player. And then depending on what build you're in, you're going to see Windswept, Candlelit, or Dreaming Tree. Dreaming Tree, whenever I see it now, and it's not like a deck that is hyper targeting its own units, makes me really scared. It gives so much value to Kaisa and Annie and Yi, and is just like really inadvisable. I think Windswept Bastion is much better. It lets you gank. It lets you like double score points with Showstopper. I think it's like a really good battlefield, and I'm a big fan of it in Yasuo. Candlelight's like a pretty good neutral battlefield. Windswept is also a battlefield that is like particularly useful when you're second player because it lets you catch up to points that are already like being held. Yeah, so the variants. I think for a long time everyone was on tall versions like the orange Sett, just like make 116 power battering ram kind of style and then like push it into a battlefield, ready ready the unit with like first mate and pull it back. But there's also the go wide version that runs yellow Sett, so Sett Kingpin, where you get to buff Sett, buff the units around him, like put them all together at a Grove of the God Willow, put a Lee Sin centered or something else around it, and you're just going to get like a massive fort of units that are hard to break. That strategy really is mostly targetable by bullet time and unchecked power. And Victor. Victor is just like not super prevalent right now. Unchecked power and bullet time can be sided against with unyielding, so it like you do have a tough time with that, but you get to survive with mostly, and you still get to save a unit in that kind of engagement. Obviously, you know, Watcher is still like pretty detrimental to this deck, but I think like if there is a deck that gets to hold with like giant formations of unit, it is this one for sure. And yeah, so some combos, for example, if you're looking at yellow Sett, you know, you're going to play like Sithri of Cloudfield, you're going to play some other units, pit rookie them, have like a bunch of buffs, play yellow Sett, and then you get to play like orange Lee Sin on all of this, and you just have like a 30-40 might battlefield that is just like not something that Kaisa gets to interact with all that well. Obviously, you know, Watcher will be the battering ram, but you're probably going to get to draw things like Primal Might and Call to Glories and a bunch of that stuff to use. And then if your opponent ever lets you hold that Grove of the God Willow, which is actually like pretty hard to break if you're on the start, then it's going to start to get out of control really fast. You're going to draw like 2 cards a turn. You're really going to just like outpace your opponent on points and on card draw. The orange Sett looks a bit different, so you're going to see things like play orange, the maneuver I was talking about, which is like play orange Sett and then ready him with we don't ready him, right? You play him, you expend his buff, you showstopper him, he gets a bit bigger, you push him into you push him into like Hillock, and then you get like the new buff. Although you didn't expend the second one, you expend his buff again. He goes up to 12. You ready him with first mate. This is like a 9 mana or 9 energy play, which is not like nothing. And you get to gank in the other battlefield. You get the buff again. So like the style is quite different, right? Like orange Sett really wants to break through battlefields and yellow Sett wants to hold them. Although I actually do think that Collins list that I'm going to show you has kind of like split the difference between these two, and you get like a pretty harmonized strategy. So yeah, I mean, the adjustment is really just like keep looking at Rift decks and look up whatever Collins doing. So this is his current deck. He was on yellow Sett with Lee Sins for a really long time. He sort of cut that down. He's on 1 yellow Sett and on 2 orange, 1 in the champ zone, 1 in the regular deck. And his sideboard is really like unyieldings, a little bit more removal, and some more aggressive plays when you're playing against decks that are like incredibly fast. Or he's on Vengeances if you're playing against like Aurora, and the Showstopper gives you an additional stun if you need early game interaction. The intricacies of the sideboard are a bit lost on me right now, and I would recommend like watching his videos as he puts them out to like figure out what everything is actually intended for. But the pace of the deck is pretty like I think easy to understand. There's 7 2-drops in the units, but sometimes you're just gonna play Sabotage. So really, you're on like 10 turn 1 plays. If you're on the second play, you're also happy playing like Arena Bar, and if you have no other plays, First Mate is also amenable. And then you just start like playing your 4 cost units, which are all incredibly annoying to most decks. Your Kinkus that buff 2 units, but obviously like Kiana up front, and then Fiora Showstopper on 5 is like one of the most sick plays. And then yeah, you have access to like your battering ram at any point. Your battlefield's pretty stock. Monastery on the neutral game, Grove when you're ahead, Hillock when you're behind, I think is really what you want to do. And then Primal Strength is there to save against removal or like trade into Vi Ride the Winds or Darius with Cleave or anything like that. So this is pretty stock. Like I feel like this deck kind of cut a lot of the like go wide stuff, but it also like really refined the orange version to also run Arena Bar for consistency. So I quite like this. I would recommend this to anybody for sure. And Colin's kind of an outlier because I think he could push this deck into placements that are a lot higher, but I do think this deck has like the sauce for sure. Second deck that I want to talk about is Gabriel San Roman's or San Roman's deck from the PPG Orlando 5K, which is the second day I think it's the Sunday, and that event was like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. This is the top 32 Sett deck. So you might notice there's only 1 Sett Brawler in the sideboard, along with 2 Leonas, no Daring Poros. This deck plays a lot more like 2-drop units early on. So you have like 3 Pit Rookie, 3 Cythrias, 3 Soaring Scouts, which gives you like, or 3/2/3, so it gives you like 8 units, and then your triple Sabotage, and then you are really like just pillow forting mostly, and you're not using the battering ram. So this is like much more of a hold deck. Because of that, you might notice that the deck is playing Dreaming Tree with like the 2 face breakers. I'm scared of playing the Dreaming Tree in this matchup, but I trust the person who made it way farther than I do in events. And then Candlelit Sanctum is kind of like your neutral Dreaming Tree, so it's whenever you conquer, you get to look at the top 2, put 1 on bottom, 1 on top. This is weird to me because this is not really a conquer deck, it's a hold deck, and Candlelit is like a low value, it's kind of like a low value battlefield for that. But I wanted to showcase something that was a bit different and was a bit less on orange Sett. But like you can see, these decks have kind of like merged towards a common core, right? Like Bars, Call to Glories, First Mate, Cythrias, Pit Rookies, Hidden Blade, Sabotage, Showstopper, Kiana and Fiora. Like these are not really negotiable. Their ratios are somewhat negotiable, but that's about it. And I'm gonna leave you with a budget list. So I've harped a lot on how Showstopper is really like amazing, but it is a steep card to invest in, primarily because it is the most expensive game piece in this deck. It's currently running around like 40 something Canadian, and Sett is the only deck that gets to run them. So I always have a tough time recommending folks cards that are like very narrow in their use. So if you want to try out this deck, this is sort of a downgrade of Colin's list. I kind of went back a bit towards what he had before. So I cut 1 Sett Brawler and replaced it with a Lee Sin centered. If you are off, like if you want to save another $20, you can cut that Sett Brawler, run Sett Kingpin, and run another Lee Sin, and then you will be like very much in that go wide style of deck. And then the Showstoppers are really replaced by the only thing that's even remotely comparable, which is Wallop. But Wallop is really like a poor man's Showstopper, because Showstopper gives you the buff up front and it moves the unit. This readies the unit, which is somewhat of a side grade, and it lets you do some other stuff. But you have to expend the buff, which is hard. You can still do it, and like obviously being on cards like Arena Bar and Cythria and Kinku lets you do that a little bit. but be careful. Um, the rest is stock. The Piltover Archive price points, I think, are a bit off because prices are going down like rapidly. The budget of the budget deck is a little bit under $50, and I think the difference between like Gabriel and Collins decks is like $30 ish. Really, like the things that are going to drive up the cost of this deck are the showstoppers and then the orange sets. My advice would be get them as you can. Get like one orange set, run it in the champ zone for consistency, then probably get like your showstoppers and then get your second set, and you should be like reasonably fine. But it's a bit it's like an investment, right? I think orange set's also going to translate like reasonably well into Fiora decks next set, so like you can get some value out of that for sure. I think that's it. Sett's like actually a pretty known quantity. I think he's got like a interesting like matchup into decks currently, and I think you're also benefiting because the vibe out of early Spirit Forged events, we talked about the Bologna event on Monday, is that purple is the color to beat. Decks that were running Draven are sort of starting to shift to like the Turbo Rasa Seal Last Rites package with battering rams. So like red is kind of on its way down, and most other like colors that want to hold are on their way down, and purple is like ascendant. So if you want to play Sett and you're just really into it, prices are sort of starting to line up with you now. So you're gonna get like your chance pretty soon. And then it's up to you whether you stick with it or not. I quite liked Sett. I sold my cards when they were at like insane prices because I got like $500 of credit for selling like 3 showstoppers and 3 brawlers. So it let me play other decks. But now is the time when I would feel like comfortable reinvesting and getting these cards for other orange decks for sure. And I think that's it for Sett. The plan on Monday is to actually move towards some discussion about decision making and knowing what lines to take and talking about speed. So it's going to be a bit of a different kind of like lecture style episode where I'm talking about like how to interact on the board, and we will be talking about like what purple is doing that I think is kind of breaking people's brains a little bit with that in mind. So that's the plan for Monday. In the meantime, good luck on your Nexus nights, on your skirmishes. I'm curious to see how people are going to feel about these FAQ changes to reflexive triggers and Falling Star and Icathian Rain, because it's probably going to change some stuff up for Kaisa, that's for sure. Otherwise, I will see you next week. And that's it. Bye.